How do you see this journey? How do you summarize this whole 40 years long journey?
It's hard to summarize because the time span is so large, and also because it's sort of an onward journey. It's not something that's kind of concluded. But I think it's been amazing. It's been tremendous because if you see, I mean, I have lived in Europe and US and seen the architectural and design world very closely there as well. And when you see the kind of transition that has happened, or the transformations rather that have happened in design there versus here, it's phenomenal. Because we started out so far back that where we are talking today, when we talk about doing world-class buildings and world-class infrastructure, we started from somewhere where we were literally a couple of centuries behind them, if not many, many decades. We were behind them, and we are now talking about the same quality of buildings. So it's been a much larger, much faster journey than what you would see what US did 100 years ago and what US is doing today. So of course there's progress everywhere, but the kind of difference in progress is very different here in the last 40 years.
Which country you find as a model for all other countries in architecture and design?
See, I would say there are different aspects in different parts of the world that one can learn from or be inspired with. If you were to ask me in terms of sensitivity to design and even culture, design is one aspect, but culture is a much bigger one. I would say the sensitivity that you see in Scandinavian countries, whether it is Finland, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, is phenomenal. The value of towards life, the quality of life, the aspects towards design. छोटी सी छोटी चीज अगर वो पेवमेंट भी डिजाइन करते हैं या वहाँ पेवमेंट पे कहाँ पे ट्रैश कैन आना है वो भी सोचते हैं, तो इतना सोच के करेंगे, इतना सोच के, यहाँ पे वो चीज दूरों दूर तक नहीं है. So that aspect, there is a lot to learn from them, and the way they sort of, their culture is very defined in that respect. You know, they really respect people and respect design. They're very sensitive towards public space. So that aspect, I think, which is very nice there.
And how do you compare this thing with our old era, Mughal era kind of design, which we see in some of the most iconic buildings, like maybe Parliament House? यहाँ तो ताजमहल भी बना है, बहुत सारे ऐसे
फतेहपुर सीकरी है,
साउथ के ढेर सारे,
मतलब कोई सारी चीजें, बिल्कुल साउथ के टेम्पल्स देखो. सो आई थिंक वो तो खैर एक जिसे हम कहते हैं अपना गोल्डन ईरा था, वो तो सच में गोल्डन ईरा था इवन इन टर्म्स ऑफ आर्किटेक्चर एंड डिजाइन, क्योंकि यहाँ पे इतना उस टाइम सिर्फ इट वाजंट अबाउट आर्किटेक्चर, इट वाज अबाउट टेक्नोलॉजी. How to use technology was, I mean, there are still answers are not there for how we were able to do what we did, whether it was the kind of gopurams that were made in the south, or the kind of things, the forts that we created in the desert, or you know, so there are those unique things that we were able to do there are unparalleled, and that times was certainly the golden era of design. But then I think when the British came, they did certain things with a certain purpose, with a certain thing in mind, you know, certain intention, and they also did it very well. If you see Lutyens' Delhi or you see Rashtrapati Bhavan and all. But I think what happened in post-modern India, post-independence India, is that architecture and public space and all these kind of things as a field went on the background because the needs of the country were perhaps more pressing. Otherwise, that architecture field was killed, and it became subservient to the engineering discipline. So you have the CPWDs of the world, not of the world, these CPWD come into the country, and the chief engineer became the chief planner. Chief designer, and chief architect was somebody 3 levels below him in whatever government hierarchy it is.
Just to follow that.
Just to follow. So it was everything engineering driven. हाँ, ये numbers multiply कर दो. जो मकान कश्मीर में बन रहा है वही का वही 40 या 120 स्क्वायर मीटर का है, तो 120 स्क्वायर मीटर का बंगाल में भी वैसा बन जाए, राजस्थान में भी वैसा बन जाए, केरला में भी वैसा बन जाए. सो इस तरीके की एक अप्रोच शुरू होगी. तो आप दूर से देख के कह सकते हो ये गवर्नमेंट बिल्डिंग है. तो वो जो एक engineering driven approach हो गई, it lost its complete sensitivity towards.
Have you seen any of the buildings, maybe we are talking in Delhi, Have you seen some buildings made in the previous time, maybe in 10, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, which is construction-wise okay, but there is no vision, there is no futuristic planning. Like we have seen even today, the parliament structure, parliament house buildings and NXC buildings, and enough space for parking.
Yes.
Even today,
Yes.
there are buildings like Shastri Bhavan and all. No parking space now. अभी 20 साल भी नहीं हुए होंगे, 30 साल भी नहीं हुए, एंड अभी से वो झड़ना भी शुरू हो रहा है और कहीं से क्राउडेड हो गया है। आपको लगता है इसमें फ्लॉ रहे हैं?
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल फ्लॉ इसलिए रहे हैं कि हमारी जो ये मास्टर प्लान ऑफ दिल्ली बने या जो बायलॉज बने हैं, they have been very short sighted. They have never looked at, कहने को दिल्ली मास्टर प्लान ऑफ दिल्ली 20 years, हर 20 years का आता है, 62 का बना, 81, 2001, every 20 years. But I don't think that document anywhere looks at a few years ahead. And the ironical thing is that by the time everything gets notified, 10, 12 years of that 20-year period are already passed.
But they also must have engaged some or other architecture designers and all.
No, they have never sought they seek public opinion like any notification or something that happens.
Yeah.
But the authors of the document remain in the hallowed halls or corridors of Vikas Minar only. They don't engage private.
Do you think that this is a flaw of the law to not give a proper authority to a planner and designer and architecture to do this job, and rather बिना लॉ के तो वो इंजीनियर भी कर देगा कि मैंने कर लिया है, एक किसी आर्किटेक्ट का मुहर लगवा लेना बस। जनरली होता है क्योंकि हम लोगों ने छोटे हाउसेस में देखे फ्लैट में कि यार वो जीडीए में जमा करना है, एक किसी से भैया उनको 750 रुपए दे देने मुहर लगा। डू यू थिंक it's necessary to have a proper law for that?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And do we have any law any such?
No, we have plenty of laws on plenty of aspects, including building sanctions, etc. There are plenty of laws. But what is happening is, first and foremost, is the policies, the planning policy. Just for example, I'll tell you, you were talking about Shastri Bhavan. Look at the district centers, how they have come. Which district center today is a success? Whether it is Nehru Place, whether it is Bhikaji Kama Place, whether it's Janakpuri, every district center today is in ruins.
Yep.
You
dirtiest
place. Half of them are vacant, yet no pedestrian policy, no parking policy, no hawker policy, no, or informal greenery sector, no greenery at all. I mean, आप भीकाजी कामा में जाके देख लो कहाँ पे पेड़ लगा हुआ है। So the policies itself have been very, very short-sighted. We have not looked at these kind of things in the larger picture. It's like I said, so engineering driven कि ठीक है, district center बन रहा है.
Is this situation continuing, or there is any change in the previous governments and the present government now? Present government is talking about the smart cities. Hundreds of smart cities are being built across the country. So do you think the pattern is same, or this government or these smart cities are now adopting what you are saying?
No, the policies that this government is coming up with, or the focus that they have, is very different. The policies are definitely something, they are more aggressive in their policy towards problem solving. But the focus is more towards, for example, one side is smart city, the other side is affordable housing. There's a lot of talk on affordable housing. So both are important. I'm not saying they're not important. But take, for example, smart cities. Smart cities has today, I was one of the proponents in that sense, truly speaking, of this idea of smart city. Whether it actually emerged from this office or not, I can't stake claim to. But the initial meetings at very high levels, etc., we made the presentation of the need for a smart city right at the beginning. But what our idea of trying to convey the impression, and then we traveled to the Smart City Global Conference in Barcelona, and lots of things one tried to do. But I now talk about smart cities that it's a classic example of the story of an elephant and 4 blind men. that you see. Everybody sees smart city from their perspective. Somebody thinks ki, oh, it has to do with recycling, somebody thinks roads, somebody says telecom.
Nobody has a complete picture.
Nobody has a complete picture, and definitely the picture that they missed out was a great urban form, great public spaces. What today the thing is being talked कि drains की declogging होनी चाहिए, that is part of smart city. Street lighting must be there, solar street lighting must be there, that's smart city.
Waste management
Reuse of water and waste management, these are smart city. But nobody is talking about, how should you have hawkers or the informal sector or public spaces, how do you rejuvenate these public spaces. जैसे भीखा जी कामा का एग्जाम्पल ले लो, उसमें कहने को तो वो प्लाजाज हैं, बट क्या वहाँ पे कोई बैठ सकता है उस प्लाजा में? So how does that, and this is what European cities have done. When they talk about smart city, they look at all these aspects. Classic example is Barcelona and many cities, of course, across Europe. So when they define a smart city, they are talking about the empowerment and facilities that they give to the citizens.
Do you mean to say that Indian smart cities should follow the Barcelona model?
The European model, certainly I would say that's something to look at very carefully, because that model of smart city is far more holistic than ours. Our smart city model is yet again, ironically, once again it is engineering driven. Like I was telling you, 70 years ago, we fell into the throes of CPWD and we believed that was the way to make buildings. Today, when we look at smart city, it is only an engineering driven solution. It's not an architecture or urban design solution. Nobody even understands what
engineering wise, are we at par with the other developed countries, or are we at par with the neighboring China?
Not at all. No. We are making efforts, we are trying to get there. So I'm not going to be cynical here and say that no, we don't have anything, but we are not at par yet, for sure.
Engineering wise, and what's the reason behind?
No, the reason is because the focus was never there on the infrastructure enough. The focus when I talk about engineering wise was only on buildings. The CPWD would make the building. But the infrastructure around, whether the roads were well made, whether there was a sidewalk for a pedestrian, whether the stormwater drain was designed properly, whether the street lighting cables were buried in the right way so that you weren't digging streets all the time, these things were not looked at earlier. So now the smart city mission is looking at some of these things. It is. But we have not yet reached that we can claim we are at par with anybody there, whether it's China or whether it's the West.
But we have now a government which is thinking about implementing new ideas, new innovations, making India, make in India, and so many other things. If I ask you to suggest 5 things to the government, that look, these 5 things should be followed, religiously followed, or maybe through a law it should be followed nationwide, what would you suggest to the present government, Modi government?
Okay, so let me start with ideas which are already part of the government's mission and suggest what they can do with that. Because just throwing other ideas in the air, I mean, I think
doesn't mean.
So let's talk about smart cities first. I would give and present an idea that while this is a fantastic initiative and must be continued, I think it needs to be looked at holistically, more from the angle and perspective of a planner, because that's how planners are trained to look at, rather than just engineering driven solutions about what we were talking earlier about, whether it's recycling or waste or that's important. I'm not trying to run that down at all, but there is something greater than that in a quality of life. It's not just about bijli milegi and pani milega. There's a little more to life than that. So that holistic approach to smart cities would take us, and that doesn't cost so much, by the way. Laying a street pipeline costs money, but creating a very active, a very successful public space, एक चौक बनाना है, वो चौक में कैसे हलचल हो जाएगी, वो चौक कैसे लाइफ बन जाएगा जगह का. And I can give you just normal common man examples like you have seen, and I'm not suggesting consumerism or anything like that, but if you've been to these Vasant Kunj malls, you have the Promenade Mall. Promenade Mall के पीछे एक fountain है. फाउंटेन के आसपास आपने पता नहीं कभी देखा है वहाँ कितनी हलचल, एक बड़ा सा टीवी स्क्रीन लगा हुआ है और क्रिकेट मैच हो रहा होता है तो वहाँ देखो कैसे हलचल, बाजार भी लगने लग गया है. उसी के साथ देयर इज दैट अदर मॉल, एम्बियंस मॉल, दोनों को आपस में कनेक्ट कैसे कर दिया है. सो एंड यू नो दिस बाहर अंदर तो होंगी जो दुकानें हैं, बाहर क्या लाइफ क्रिएट हो गई है. सो I'm just saying that these are very simple things. अब बाहर stall लगाने में तो नहीं पैसा लगता, but stall के साथ एक fountain चल रहा है या एक TV screen लगा हुआ है या वैसे ही band बज रहा है, just somebody singing there, that doesn't cost money. So these are the things that you go abroad and you applaud.
Yeah.
You go to Harvard Square. I studied at Harvard. Every weekend or in the evening you go to Harvard Square, just another square. Actually, it's not even a square. If you've been to Boston, Cambridge, they're just narrow streets there, but there'll be a band playing in one corner, there's a fountain on the other side. It's halchal. So that kind of thing, approach is missing in what we are trying to rejuvenate our cities.
Okay.
So that's, I would just give a simple example for smart cities, how that our government can take up a different perspective to it. Second, let me talk about affordable housing. Now, affordable housing today, again, great initiative. I'm all for it. It's such an important thing, housing for all. But here right now, we are engulfed or overwhelmed with the idea of 30 square meters or 35 square meters or this square meters or that square meters. Balcony should be counted or balcony should not be counted. That's important. Sure, everything costs money, so yes, important to get your numbers. But you need to create, and then they are talking about let's adopt some uniform technology and build all the houses across the country the same way. That's not the way to do it. Just the way you and me find our homes very important, and we would not live in something we cannot like. The same way a man who's going to live from a shanty and move into an affordable home has dreams and has certain expectations. So why would affordable housing in West Bengal have to look like the one it will be in Gujarat or Rajasthan? You have to address the climate, you have to address the culture. You're building in the coast, or you're building in the desert, or you're building in the hills. Yeah. You have to address affordable housing in that way. That's getting missed out. So I would say, looking at the nuances of our climate, our culture, our style of living, and then still building 30 square meter, whether in Bengal or Rajasthan, it's possible. And that is something I think would be very important also. So these are two of the aspects which I think the government is already doing, and it's so easy to bring this added touch to it.
Okay. And also the engineering and other things should be promoted at par with the countries like China.
Yes. I mean, for example, technology is very important. अगर आपने इतने मकान बनाने हैं.
अभी हमने एक वीडियो देखा हाल में जिसमें ऑटोमेटिक जैसे कोई कंप्यूटर पे चीजें खड़ी होती हैं, वैसे वो बिल्डिंग्स खड़े हो रहे हैं, पिलर्स निकल रहे हैं, पिलर्स पे वो छत चल रही है, फिर वो खुल गया, फिर वो पूरी हाउस क्रिएट हो जाती है. क्या ऐसा वास्तव में बन रहा है या
ये 3D प्रिंटिंग बिल्डिंग्स
और वो फोल्ड करके फिर वो लेके चले जाते हैं?
बिल्कुल. अभी आज के पेपर में शायद था, आज के अखबार में टाइम्स ऑफ इंडिया में, आई थिंक दैट somebody said कि they want to sell their farmhouse, but the condition they have put is कि देखो प्राइस चलो हम आपकी मान लेंगे, लेकिन कंडीशन ये फार्म हाउस को आप यहाँ से उठा के ले जाओगे, ये फार्म हाउस को उठा के मूव कर दोगे, आप फार्म हाउस फ्री का है, आप ले जाओ, बट ले जाओ यहाँ से फार्म हाउस बिल्डिंग.
Is it possible?
Well, I mean, I can't just straight away answer yes or no. It will depend on what it is built out of.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, अगर पत्थर का बना है तो पत्थर का ही है.
अभी तो हाई कोर्ट लगा है कि हनुमान मंदिर हटाओ यार. हनुमान जी की मूर्ति. अब वो परेशान है कि ये 200 फीट 150 फीट पता कैसे उठाएंगे, कहाँ ले जाएंगे.
बिल्कुल.
तो anyway,
so certainly technology is important.
You have made several iconic buildings, and it's all recorded, all written everywhere, but still many people are not aware of that. I would request you to tell us something about what you have made which is important from your point of view.
So one of the projects that immediately comes to my mind and is quite close to my heart is the Gautam Buddha University in Greater Noida.
Okay.
Because that was a project which was very challenging. First of all, it's exciting because what you are designing is not just a university, but you're actually designing a city in a way. Because if you have 5,500 students staying there, living on campus, and you have about 600 faculty and their families, so you're looking at a population of easily 25 to 30,000 people. So it's a city. Many European towns are that or smaller size. So you are getting to build something where you can influence the way people will think and live completely. So in that sense, it was very exciting. And you can actually create an environment which can become conducive to learning or not conducive to learning. So all those things play a big role. So here we created a university which was on a flat piece of land. Like the first time I went to that piece of land, which was 500 acres, there was not even a tree on 500 acres, Greater Noida.
Right.
Not even a tree on that land. बिल्कुल खाली सा था. So what we have transformed it into is something else altogether. So that has been a very satisfying project. And today that university is ranked in the top 10 best designed universities of the world. So you have a list of Harvard, Yale, Oxford, Cambridge, and Gautam Buddha University from it. So that's been very satisfying, and people love that campus. I get such fantastic responses from everybody. Faculty, students, vice chancellor, visitors. So it's been very rewarding in that.
You're doing something in Dwarka also. And
The Dwarka project is again very exciting because here we talk about the third campaign that is there of this government, which is Make in India.
Yeah.
And here we are very fortunate that we are creating, which will be one of India's largest building projects to date, till date ever. That's even by financial numbers, it's like 26,000 crore project, where we are building the India's and Asia's second largest convention center. Because the Prime Minister wants to host the G20 summit in India.
Okay.
So for that, we are very fortunate that we are working on Pragati Maidan, the redevelopment of Pragati Maidan, which is an iconic marquee project.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then we are doing this Dwarka, which is even far larger than Pragati Maidan. Because Pragati Maidan, for example, the convention center is 7,000 capacity, Dwarka is 10,000 capacity. Pragati Maidan is about 110 acres, Dwarka is 225 acres. But this is the second largest in Asia and third largest in the world. And it is a state-of-the-art building which will be made. Like, people all over the world will look up and find this building. It has many firsts to it. It will be a building with the largest LED facade ever to have been attempted, and many other things that are there. Many unique things in this building and the entire complex. And that's all being done in India. So, and we are Indian architects here designing that campus.
And when you design such really iconic buildings, what are the things first of all comes in your mind that I should focus on this, or I will be implementing this in particular this project?
See, in my design approach, it's there subconsciously, so it's not something one needs to make an effort for. It's just somewhere in my DNA itself that whenever you are designing projects of this kind or anything which is very iconic, that you search and go through examples that have been done in the world before. Mm-hmm. But very intuitively, the solution that we try to find is always, without any effort being made, conscious effort, is to indigenize it. And when I say indigenize it, for example, we are talking here about a convention center. How does a convention center function? What are the components of this capacity? What are the components of this kind of a convention center? Now, whether it is a VIP movement of helipads or convoys of cars coming in, very secured entrances, or their lounges, or whatever other things go in this kind of a state-of-the-art convention center, something you look around in the world. What has China done? What has Germany done? What has Japan done? What has US done? We look at those examples. But then intuitively comes the play that how do you create something that belongs to India? So for us, it would be very easy, but it's very alien to us that we will say, oh, this building in Atlanta, this looks so cool. It's metal and glass.
And I should make
and
something
I can
different.
make something like that or something more better than
that.
But what we believe in is that how will our building, whatever we create, you may consider it good or bad, but whatever we create, how is it going to feel that it is India? So I could take you through the example of the convention center in Dwarka, that how many elements of India we have tried to bring into that entire complex. Whether it's a simple salutary gesture of a namaste or a welcome, how we open arms and hug as opposed to Western countries, not so used to. So how our buildings demonstrate that welcoming feature. So anybody who's coming feels that sense of welcome.
Yeah.
So from that to the fact that, in India, we were talking about Fatehpur Sikri or the Mughal architecture, the idea of jalis and screens and motifs, how they were so prevalent and relevant in Indian architecture to cut the heat and create shade and shadow, etc., etc. How can we make that into these modern buildings? Are we just going to make that same Pulpatti ki jali with stone, or using modern technology, we are still going to be inspired by designs and use technology to do it, whether it's CNC machines or whether it's customizing it and using materials which are more modern today, which can do larger things. So that's where the marriage comes, that you use the Western, or not just Western, global technology. Aajkal you can't say Western, because there's so much coming from China also in technology. So how do you use global technology? But the design must have an Indian essence to it.
So how do you get the inspirations, and from where you get the inspirations?
So for example, in the Gautam Buddha University, if you were to, have you visited that
No, I have
university?
not.
Oh, I must share images, or
In fact, I'll suggest you, whenever you are doing this kind of project, you should take a media tour. You should take the media people to tour the projects which is already made or which is under construction, to tell them about these things. Any organization does that, yeah.
That's a very good idea. That's a very good idea.
Otherwise, people will never understand who did it
And why?
and why.
Why? Bilkul, bilkul. And unless you take that message out to the people, we'll never get better educated on these things. So yeah, that's an excellent idea. I'll keep it in
So
mind.
I'll be really interested to whenever
So
you.
maybe I'm going to take this call and invite you. We are doing a very interesting project in Madhya Pradesh, which is the new Secretariat building.
Okay.
And that's 1 million square feet, and it's just getting completed in 1 month from now. It's a very large.
1 million square feet, and you are going to.
No. It's been going on for the
Okay,
last
fine.
3 years. It's been going on since last 3 years. Now it is nearing completion. So a media tour could be very good to show you
Yeah.
what has come out. And what's very interesting is just about not this past Sunday, the Sunday before that, I happened to meet one of the very renowned ministers from Madhya Pradesh, and we were just talking. So she asked me, this is Yashoda Rajesh
Okay.
Sindhya. She asked me, what are the projects? Have you done anything recently in Madhya Pradesh? So I mentioned to her, we are doing that building. And everybody knows that building, right? Because it's happening. She says, I cannot believe it. I didn't realize it was being done by an Indian architect. And I had never in my life seen such a beautiful government building. She said, it's like a breath of fresh air. I'm quoting her. She said, it's like a breath of fresh air. So it felt really good that, and there again, we have created something which is very modern and yet has a lot of influences of architecture from Madhya Pradesh, from Sanchi, from that region itself.
Yeah.
We've been inspired by lots of things.
I was talking about the inspiration, your inspiration. How do you get, from where you get the inspirations to do all these things?
So it's always project to project. I mean, like I said, some fundamentals always remain, that whatever you are trying to create, it should feel that it is rooted. It belongs to that place. It should not feel it has been picked up or plucked from somewhere and inserted. So whether it is something being done in Connaught Place or whether it is something like in IIT Jodhpur.
घर बनाने का काम जो है वो दरअसल फीमेल ओरिएंटेड और हाउस को हम बनाना चाहिए, या कभी उनके सजेशन या कभी उनके आइडियाज.
So, yeah, true. My wife is actually, she's not from the design field per se, although she's more from the interior side. She's not an architect. But there have been lots of times where I have actually discussed my design thoughts or design ideas with her, and she happens to be my strongest critic.
Okay.
The strongest critic, which obviously helps in making the design better and better. So yes, without, unintentionally, but purely out of interest, we discuss design ideas, and I get lots of feedback from her.
And where you have lived from your father to your own house, is it so iconic something, or
That you have to come over and then you can decide. We have to have you tour the house, come and visit the house to see what you think about it. But I am living in Basant Vihar, so I just recently moved there.
you designed that?
Yes, of course, yes.
Okay.
And that house for me is again something I very strongly believe in, that it's a fusion of all the arts. So it's about fusion of architecture and art, and it's a fusion of building and landscape. These two things go like this. ये अलग नहीं कि ये बिल्डिंग और ये बाहर पेड़ है. The two have to come together like that. Same thing is with art. कि अगर ये नहीं कि ये गार्डन है और इसमें ये मूर्ति है या ये दीवार है और इसके ऊपर ये पेंटिंग लगी है.
हर फील्ड में इंसान का अपना एक ड्रीम प्रोजेक्ट होता है कि अगर मुझे यार ये मौका मिल जाए तो मैं ये वाली फिल्म करूंगा और इतनी बड़ी फिल्म बनाऊंगा. तो अगर आपको वास्तव में कोई मौका मिले और हिंदुस्तान के लिए कि वो हिंदुस्तान का ताजमहल साबित हो जाए या कुछ ऐसी चीज साबित हो जाए, आप क्या करना चाहेंगे? व्हाट्स योर ड्रीम प्रोजेक्ट और एनी सच थिंग्स व्हिच यू हैव थॉट ऑफ कि काश मुझे ये दे देते कि मैं अनदर पार्लियामेंट हाउस बना दूं, मैं बना के दिखाता कि ऐसा होता है.
So, ऐसे तो खैर कई थॉट्स आती हैं माइंड में कि कौन सी चीज हम अगर मौका मिलता तो कैसे करते, बट जो प्राइम एक थॉट मेरे माइंड में हमेशा रही है.
आजकल विजुअल का जमाना है और विजुअल ट्वीट होके सीधा पीएमओ तक पहुंच सकता है. तो बाय द वे आपको कहना हो मिस्टर मोदी को, मिस्टर मोदी यू आर देयर एंड आई वांट टू मेक इट दिस प्रोजेक्ट, गिव इट थॉट ऑन दिस, क्या करना चाहेंगे आप?
So I would like to definitely do two things. One is कि जो अभी एक तरीके का हमारे कंट्री में बड़ा सीरियस इशू है जो और सीरियस होगा आने वाले समय में, इज द अर्बन रूरल डिवाइड. आई थिंक अर्बन हमारी सिटीज डिके होती चली जा रही है, चाहे उन्हें स्मार्ट बनाए या स्मार्टर बनाए, बट एक्चुअली तो डिके ही हो रही है. कहीं की भी क्वालिटी ऑफ लाइफ की बात कर लो, whether it's Delhi or anywhere. So the urban cities are decaying and the villages have been neglected so far. So my one dream would be to create now or usher in smart cities भी चलो बात हो गई. I would usher in smart towns and I would do something because हमारा फोकस हमेशा बड़ी सिटीज पे ही रहता है. मुंबई शंघाई बन जाएगा, दिल्ली वाशिंगटन बन जाएगा, you know those kind of things keep happening in the media also, maybe in the political realm. But I would say let's look at the real middle belly of India, which is the towns, and how can we improve the complete design of our towns. And what all can be done to do that, because they might be smart.
They are all overcrowded, overpopulated.
No, they
can you
will be
redesign
coming. Of course, it can be still fixed. Or are we going to wait till they'll be gasping for breath, जैसे दिल्ली का हाल हो गया कि सांस नहीं ले सकते अब यहाँ पे? तो are we going to wait for that to happen to our thousands of towns, or can we do something? I believe we can do something very simply and efficiently if we do it now. So that's one dream that I have. And the second dream that I would like to do is that I really respect and honor the Prime Minister's vision of housing for all. Because इससे बड़ी बात क्या सोच सकते हैं Prime Minister कि actually हर इंसान को छत चाहिए, मिलना चाहिए. It's आप देखो अभी ठंड के मौसम में या किसी मौसम में जब स्ट्रीट पे लोग सो रहे होते हैं और गाड़ी उनके ऊपर चली जाती है और एक दिन की न्यूज़ बन के वो खत्म हो जाती है. तो I think somewhere we are not being the right human
आप
beings.
जो कुछ भी बना रहे हैं उसमें निश्चित रूप से पीएम का स्वच्छता अभियान भी होगा और जो आजकल ग्रीन एनर्जी और क्लीन एनर्जी की बात होती है वो भी हो रही है.
बिल्कुल. सो दैट्स वेयर माय सेकंड ड्रीम इज कि ये जो अफोर्डेबल हाउसिंग है इसको एक ऐसा रूप दिया जाए कि इट कैन बी अ हाउस व्हिच दैट पर्सन इज सो प्राउड ऑफ. और ये नहीं कि बस हम एक तरीके की एक सॉरी फिगर करने के लिए चलो बना दी ऐसी हाउसिंग, जैसे मैं अखबारों में फोटो देखता हूँ कि जी नरेगा में इतने मकान बन गए या वहाँ बुरारी में इतने मकान बन गए जहाँ कोई जाके रह भी नहीं रहा. तो ये एक अपॉलॉजी ऑफ अ हाउसिंग नहीं बनानी चाहिए, एक सेलिब्रेशन ऑफ हाउसिंग बनानी चाहिए कि बेशक वो 300 फुट का मकान क्यों ना हो, 6 लाख 8 लाख का क्यों ना हो, बट इट्स अ ग्रेट क्वालिटी ऑफ एनवायरनमेंट दैट वी क्रिएट. और ये करना मुश्किल नहीं है.
One last question. How do you see the education, especially in the field of architecture, design, engineering in India? The present status of the architectural education.
Again, without meaning to sound cynical, which I hope I have not been in this discussion, I think we are in a phase where it's a matter of serious concern because our education in the architectural sphere is lacking the major aspects that an architect should be trained for. And those are uppermost creativity. That's very important. The second aspect is the aspect of what's the difference between an artist and an architect. An architect has to create something which is going to live beyond his lifetime and which others are going to use. An artist can just paint the painting and enjoy it for himself. So our training in architectural education lacks the realistic practical aspects of technology and construction practices, and that is somewhere missing or very weak. So these are two. So one side of the spectrum is creativity. कि बस खुल के कर लो जो करना है. That is very inhibited in our architectural education in India versus whether you go to Taiwan and Korea, is taraf, or of course the West. They are far more liberated in their creativity. And the second side is the access to technology, understanding of technology. That is not very well taught in architectural schools. So I think both these have to come together stronger. So architectural education really needs more work in our country. And one of the third aspects which will probably help in solving these first two issues are that good quality of teachers, which is, I think, cutting across all our other educational fields also. Because you don't, maybe it's the pay scales, or maybe it's just that the social respect to teachers has waned over the decades in India, that this is a profession which is taken up mostly by chance by people rather than by choice.
Thank you so much for giving so much time.
Oh, it's my pleasure. No, it's my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.